directly investment, but look at the different methods that investors could use to invest in alternative investments. Well, of course, the most obvious one is through funds that specialize in this. The problem with that is that they're going to charge fees. So, to minimize fees, what you could do is something called co investing, where you invest in the assets that the fund is investing in, but you do it alongside them. So it's kind of like direct investment, but the choice of assets depends on the funds. And then, of course, direct investing, where not only are you directly buying the asset, but also you are choosing which asset to buy. A very nice infographic from the curriculum illustrates this. So, fund investing is going through the fund, and then the fund does everything for you. And naturally, they're going to charge you fees for this. If you want to save the fees, you can still invest in the same assets, but directly. So, you save some of your cost, or you can invest in the asset directly and even choose which asset to invest in, and that is pure direct investing. In co-investing, the fund is the one which is choosing the asset and you're just kind of copying them. Right, so let's have a look at the advantages and disadvantages. So in fund investing, the cost is high, right? Straight up. There's going to be management fees and performance fees. Management fees is fixed based on the amount of money that you're going to invest, and performance fees is linked to the profit that you will have. Usually what we see is a 2 and 20 structure, that they take 2% of the amount that you have invested and they take 20% of the profit, right? But here it's a relaxed environment for you, not much to do. They do everything else. You get an access to these very sophisticated areas without having the expertise yourself, and you can even enter with small amount of investment. You don't need a much bigger amount, which would be the case if you were going for direct. And think about it in terms of buying a real estate example, right? I mean, if you're going to buy it yourself, naturally you can't do it with just a few $1,000s, but you can definitely invest in a fund with a few $1,000s. However, there is still some work to be done here. You need to still choose which fund to invest in. So selecting the right fund, of course, is important. And another problem here is that there is lock-up periods, that you cannot take your money out. Remember I told you about illiquidity of alternative investments? Well, here you go. There's lock-up periods, and even after the lock-up period is over, let's say the lock-up period is 5 years, that you can't take your money out for the first 5 years. Even after that is over and you want to take your money out, there will be a notice period that you will have to first serve before you can get a withdrawal. So let's move to co-investing. Now this is best of both worlds. It's not direct, but it's not fund investing either. It's copying what the fund is doing, right? So you save fees, but you still get an insight onto what the fund is doing, so you can learn from their process, right? You can even develop a deeper relationship with them, but at the same time doing it yourself, so saving the cost. Now, what could be the problems here, the disadvantages? Of course, you don't know what's going on, right? So the selection process is something that the fund is doing, and you might face something called adverse selection bias, that because you don't know what's going on, you don't have the information, maybe you might end up doing the wrong selection, right? And the challenge here would be to get actively involved with the fund and try and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And if you have the amount of money and sophistication yourself, well, then you can just altogether avoid working with the fund and save all that money. This will give you the greatest amount of flexibility. You can sell the assets, right? The the lockup period is not there, the notice period issue is not there, you have complete control over your assets. However, this is not for everybody. There is a certain level of sophistication required. There's a certain amount of investment, critical mass, right? Because, I mean, you won't have diversification. When you go through a fund, they're doing it for 100 other people, probably, if not more, and they are investing the money across various different assets. You might only be able to get one or two properties. So again, diversification is going to be a problem. There's going to be more concentration here, and maybe you don't have the amount of money required or the amount of expertise required to do it, or maybe you do, right? So obviously that is a big point in deciding whether you want to save that fees, right, and go for direct investment if you have that critical mass in terms of both investment and expertise. Right. So that is the different methods you can get your exposure. We'll come back and talk about the different compensation structures. So let's say you do decide on going through a fund, right? Then what is the compensation structure that there can be between you, the investor, and the fund? So we will come back and talk about it.